Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural show of MAGA Brett. Now, this podcast is going to be bringing you, as you can guess, with MAGA, Make America Great Again, news and highlights. And I went with that title because I didn't want to just give my name because you don't know me yet. So why not tell you right off the bat that you're dealing with somebody who's a conservative, and even more than that, somebody who supports the best president in United States history, Donald J. Trump. So welcome to MAGA Brett. Why don't we start with MAGA, Make America Great Again. Now you're probably going to think that started in 2015 when presidential nominee Donald J. Trump was running, but actually it started with presidential nominee Ronald Reagan in 1980 when he coined the term, "Let's Make America Great Again." So it was a little different version. In 2015, our great president named it Make America Great Again. But back in 1980, President Reagan was running. The unemployment was high. Inflation was high. Does that sound familiar? Like 2024 when Donald Trump was running? Inflation high, poor economy in both cases. Why? Because a Democrat was president. Not a coincidence. So Make America Great Again, very much a conservative movement, very much a movement that not only conservatives are joining through the years, but also disenfranchised Democrats have done too. Now, one of the things that I have in common with Donald J. Trump, well, certainly not money, he's a billionaire and I'm not, but one of the things I have in common with him is that we were both former Democrats. So one thing I wanted to talk to today is a little bit about my history. So I came from a Democrat family. I was a Democrat for many years. And in the 1980s, I was in college, and guess who was president then? Ronald Reagan, President Reagan. And I was a journalism student. I was on the school newspaper. And I still remember conversations. We were all liberals, we were all Democrats. But we were journalists, and we were trained by the journalism professors at our school on the standard of objectivity. In other words, you're going to present a story that's objective and let the readers decide. And I remember conversations on the newspaper about that. None of us liked Reagan, we were all liberals. But we were going to say, hey, you know what, we're going to write these stories. And these stories are going to speak for themselves. And if it shows President Reagan in a good light, okay. If it shows him in a negative light, okay. And that's the way the journalism ethic is supposed to be. Do you get that today? No. So one of the things that President Trump has coined over the years is what? Fake news. Now, I will actually say it's worse than fake news. I will say it's propaganda. And let me read you what propaganda is. Propaganda, by definition, is the systematic dissemination of information, such as facts, rumors, half-truths, or lies, designed to influence public opinion, shape collective attitudes, and promote a specific political cause or agenda, Democrat. It typically presents information in a biased or misleading way to trigger an emotional rather than rational response. Does not that sound like the fake news? It does, but it's even more pointed. I believe you call it propaganda because that's what it is. So think of everything that you hear from the leftist mainstream media, and this is going to be a show that I'm going to have specifically on this very topic, the news and how corrupt it is, and how over the years it has hurt not only President Trump, but it's hurt conservative values and those of us who are voting Republican because we believe that's the only patriotic party that truly embodies the ideals of the U.S. Constitution. I did find it this is interesting, when I was looking at MAGA prior to this show, I did find the other side, people who had left MAGA. And there's this one person, his name is Rich Logos, he was the founder of Leaving MAGA. And He started this back in 1921. What's interesting is one thing that he says here. He's leaving MAGA, and this is what he says. Now, tell me if you haven't heard this before. It's difficult for a democracy to function well when millions are estranged from those closest to them. He's talking about people leaving MAGA and families still in MAGA. But I'm going to go at the word democracy. If you hear democracy, where have you heard that before? If you watch any kind of a TV show, whether it's Fox News or Newsmax, or you watch other podcasts, you see time and time again who uses the word democracy. The left, the politicians, the leftist shows do, CNN, MSNBC. These kind of shows use we are against Trump because we are protecting democracy. What's wrong with that, though? Do we live in a democracy? No, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. In fact, we're celebrating this month the 250 years of our constitutional republic, celebrating the great ideals of freedom of speech, the Second Amendment, protecting our gun rights. Democracies don't do that. You know the definition of democracy? This is the definition of democracy. You tell me if this sounds like a constitutional republic where you have rights of free speech and right to own guns. And democracy is mob rule. That's what the Democrats want. That's what their friends at the leftist media want in this country. And that's what MAGA opposes. That's what the greatest president in U.S. history opposes. That's what his administration, despite the comings and goings, is still arguably one of the best administrations in U.S. history. And that's amazing. Think about it. This doesn't get talked about a lot. Do you remember when President Trump was running? I'll tell you a funny story. Well, I think it's funny. Back then, I wasn't MAGA. Most of us were. We didn't even know about MAGA. All I knew is I wanted a Republican president after the absolute disaster of Obama. And so running for president was Donald J. Trump, was Jeb Bush, was Marco Rubio, and a host of others. But do you remember the nature of the relationship with Donald Trump and Marco Rubio? It wasn't good. No, it was good. I mean, all of them, in a way, kind of teamed up against Trump when they were all going for the nomination, because here was this outsider, Donald Trump, and here were the established Republicans like Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, who was in the Senate at the time. Now, flash forward. Isn't it amazing? And this is part of the MAGA movement, too. Isn't it amazing the kind of relationship that President Trump has with Secretary of State Marco Rubio? I get emotional thinking about it because it just goes to show how far we've come, right? Marco Rubio arguably is the most important person in the administration. President Trump thinks so highly of Marco that he puts different hats on him. He jokes about it. Marco Rubio jokes about, well, I'm this today, I'm running this today, because he's so valued, because he's so smart, because he's so loyal, because he is going to be president of the United States at some point in the history. We're going to have, when you think about it, potentially, we're going to have Marco Rubio for the next 20 years. Think about it. So 4 years as Secretary of State. Maybe he's vice president to President J.D. Vance, and then he becomes president again, hopefully for 8 years. Both those times, that equals 20 years. That's astounding. But you couldn't have told me that 10, 11 years ago. I couldn't stand the guy. It was awful. Just when I started to embrace Trump as candidate, here was this guy kind of standing in his way. But I could tell you at the very beginning of this in 2015, I looked at President Trump, then candidate Trump, in a far different way. I remember there were, you had, of course, the Democrats running Hillary Clinton and others, and you could go online, you could take your views on the top 10 or 11, 12 issues, and you could test them and see how they're rated against all the candidates. And my views are probably a little more eclectic then, still conservative, but even now they're even more conservative today. But I'm doing all these tests. Why did I do all these tests? Because the very first test I took, 80%. Nobody was even close on my views. One candidate was at 80%. I was in agreement with, well, the other candidates were at best 60, 62, 65%. They were all Republican. But this one candidate, this brash, arrogant New Yorker, Trump, I was like, there's no way I can be in agreement with this guy. I don't want him to be president. No way. I kept taking test after test, and it all came out Trump, 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 Trump. I was resigned as that campaign unfolded to being, to supporting what would be eventually the greatest president in American history. But he's changed over the years, hasn't he? Have you noticed that change? Maybe all the heat he's taken, maybe all the sham indictments he's had to endure, maybe the fact that he was arrested on one of those sham indictments. He's stronger now. He's more focused. I think he loves the American people more. He wants to see us succeed. He's brought along partners like Elon Musk. Remember, it wasn't that long ago, Elon was pretty left. He's not left anymore because why? Because they went after him. They're still going after him. Because he's not part of their deep state system. And so they're gonna go after President Trump. They're gonna go after now trillionaire Elon Musk. They're gonna go after you and me because we're MAGA. And that's why this show is starting and existing, because Make America Great Again is not just for America, ultimately. And this is the thing where I think we sell President Trump short a little bit. First, he was the best president of my lifetime. And now he's the best president in American history. But really, when you look at it, when all the books are written, the books that are written objectively, we'll get back to that word again, objectively, when those books are written, President Trump is not only going to be the best president in American history, he's going to be one of the best world leaders in history. That's how powerful not only his presidency, but his leadership has been. Because look at what he's doing in the world. Look who's falling. Venezuela's falling. Iran's falling. Cuba's going to fall. The globalization that the whole world has wanted, including the Barack Obamas and the RINOs like Jeb Bush and family, that's all falling to the wayside. Why? Because of President Donald J. Trump. So on this inaugural episode of MAGA Brett, that's where I stand. And I hope you stand with me as we go about. We're going to talk about various things. We're going to talk about the mainstream media. We're going to talk about the RINOs. We're going to talk about, I think President Trump's calling them the Democrats now, not Democrats, Democrats. We're going to talk about them really not even just being outright communists now. That's what they are. Outright communists. They don't even hide it anymore. We're going to talk about the importance of the midterms and how are we going to win that. It's the hope of this show to have some people like Seth Keshel, for example, on the show, because Seth Keshel is a guru of looking at races and seeing where we stand. And he's seeing it pretty close, but encouraging signs that we could win these midterms. And we'll talk about why we can win these midterms. But what we want to address is current events. What we want to address is things that are in opposition to MAGA that might be dangerous. I mentioned one group. Not surprisingly, they're all about democracy. So watch for these things. As we do these podcasts, as you do your own research, and I always encourage people to do their own research, go out there and look. Don't necessarily agree with everything I say. Go out there and see. See if what I'm telling you is truthful. I can tell you this, though. As a former student of journalism, I was trained in the right way, not the way that most of the leftist media do it. The way journalism was supposed to be was on a standard of objectivity, on a standard of presenting the truth to the viewer or the person reading the newspaper or magazine. That's what we want to adhere to. And that's what this show wants to adhere to, is the truth. We want to present the truth to you. And we hope that some of you that watch the show, and maybe you're leaning on the fence a little bit, is that we help show you the light of what MAGA brings, of the importance of what President Donald J. Trump means to not only this country, but to this world. He was chosen for this time. Our God in heaven chose him during this time to be a leader, to do ultimately his will, God's will. I mean, look at July 2024. His head moved, President Trump's head moved just slightly. Otherwise, he would have been assassinated that day in Butler, Pennsylvania. Instead, he was struck in the air. And he got up, and one of my favorite mugs is right here. Right here. He got up, put that fist in the air, and said, fight, fight, fight. That's our leader. That's who we follow. Remember, when watching this podcast, whatever episode you watch, MAGA Brett is about following the greatest president in American history. Thank you for joining today.